Hi, welcome to Smack Talk. I'm your host, Thomas.
I'm Jeremy.
I'm Michael.
I'm Daja.
I'm Jacob.
And today we will be talking about esports. So, firstly, this was somewhat recent. ESPN aired the League of Legends tournament on ESPN3, and they aired the, what was it that you said?
The Heroes of the Dorm.
Yeah, Heroes of the Storm on their main channel. And so they later released a statement saying that esports aren't really a sport. So first off, kind of what's everyone's...
Was that actually ESPN that released that statement?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought it just was one guy.
I thought
it
it was
was
just an
it was like
announcement.
the
CEO,
manager.
wasn't it?
Well,
Yeah, it was the
imagine
CEO.
I imagine it was
Okay.
pressure.
The CEO is now the esports director at Blizzard.
The CEO
Or maybe that was
of
the
ESPN?
former CEO. And the
Either
new
way,
CEO maybe
someone
said
high
this.
up released a statement to, like was in an interview said, this isn't really a sport, and we don't believe in this. But they also air things like, poker.
Yeah.
And the national spelling
I
bee.
know they've aired Dota as well.
Exactly.
So, I guess kind of, what are we going to define as a sport here to claim whether or not this is valid?
All right,
we'll
so
start with you.
I'll just start, the thing about, I feel like it's always, a really dumb argument to start going, oh, it's not a sport, and therefore that, invalidates it as, a competition stuff. A sport, I think, can be, somewhat of a vague word for it. It's a competition where players have sponsors, they make a living off of it. There are plenty of viewers. The League of Legends finals had 27 million, more than, the World Series. So I think that validates it as a sport.
I mean, but you could say the exact same things about TED Talks, and that's not really a sport. I mean,
TED Talks not a
27.
competition.
Yeah, it's not a competition at all.
Oh, well, that
You don't make
means
just a
competition
speech.
part, I guess. I mean, the whole sponsorship. Yeah, never mind. Go ahead.
Wouldn't then a debate club competition that gets televised, would that be considered a sport?
Yeah, it could be considered a sport.
It could
by
be
that
considered a
logic.
sport if there was a competition.
Competition would be a better.
You'd have to
I think
redefine
sports have
competition.
basically become competitions now, and I think
It's like
if
that
you
whole
want to
cheerleader debate
if you want to
last
go
few years
a
ago.
traditional sports like athletics or something, they're called esports for a reason. It's mostly because it's easy to say. You kind of get the idea when someone says an esport. You just kind of caught on. If you want to call it a video game competition, I guess, but at that point you're just going you're getting caught too much on the name of it, and not that there's people that are practicing all day in these team houses, for several hours. Actually, a lot of work they're putting in. Yeah. They have sponsors, they're making money and things like that. It's definitely a legitimate competition just as much as any traditional sport would be.
I feel like you're really onto something when you say it's something about the name, because if you think about ESPN and everybody watching ESPN, it's the old guard of competitions and sports.
Mm-hmm.
They're the football fans, they're the NASCAR fans. They're all these fans of all these sports that have been around for a long time. They've established themselves, and they've just been there forever. And so when you bring in esports, people look at well, that's not a sport. You can't call that an e-sport. No one gets hit in that. And it goes back to that old adage where it's well, if you could smoke while doing it, it isn't a sport. And so I think the real problem is the definition that we're using of sport. It needs to be redefined as the field is growing.
Well,
Yeah.
how is car racing a sport? And how is that different from esports? You're technically using a vehicle or machine to do the work for you.
It is
Exactly.
physically demanding, but so you could say esports
Pressing
would
the
also
gas
be.
pedal.
Well, yeah, but then you gotta
I mean, what's the difference between pressing a button?
well, you gotta think about there's a bunch of techniques in when NASCAR there's a drafting. You gotta know exactly.
The point is that just actually how you put that is how a lot of people put a video game.
Exactly.
They will just straight up go yeah, you're just sitting there, you hit a couple buttons and that's it.
And that's
and just how you went off about how complicated it actually is racing. That's how someone who is into esports can very much talk about esports
And
in their game.
you guys remember? I think it was Jimmy Kimmel who came out and he insulted esports immediately. He made a statement on his show and he insulted esports, and a ton of people came back and they fought him back. I think that's one of the reasons that people aren't really taking it seriously, is because You insult esports, you get a bunch of people up in arms, and they get very angry, and they write these like, hate letters.
But how,
And that's-
how
I mean,
is
there's
that really-
27 million
How
viewers.
is that really any different? Because if I just looked to the camera and said, by the way, baseball is not a sport, anyone who likes baseball is just an idiot,
That's the problem.
we'd get
That's
a
not true.
wall of comments on
that's
this video.
that's the problem. Everybody's like explaining all these like these hate remarks and everything. It's like, well, now you just look like an idiot. Like
Yeah.
you can't go if once you go into like a topic with anger and like violence in like your
Yeah.
attitude, then immediately people are gonna stop taking you seriously because it's like, you're acting like a child.
It's
You're not behaving maturely.
it sounds like really dumb because it's the kind of the same thing of like people just not accepting something that's new. People were like this with like cell phones coming out with just computers. IBM was like, oh, people would never have a home computer. Why would you need that? It's for business. Like in esports are kind of like this sort of thing again of people are like, that's not a real sport. And then like, I mean, it's growing very quickly. Like
It's very
it's
rapid.
kind of just it boomed ridiculously. And within like the decade, it could be like the biggest thing, basically.
So it's more like a generational thing where
Yeah.
I think
Just-
it's
Yeah,
because they're
it's new.
young.
I mean,
I think it is a very generational thing.
I feel
Yes.
like the
Very
main
young
reason
sport.
like ESPN would come out and say that, or anyone would say esports is not a sport is more of an image thing. Because I mean,
Yes.
most athletes or people who do like athletic things, like people who just go out and play sports, are usually influenced by athletes on TV, like football, basketball, and everything. It promotes a very active and healthy behavior. And now with esports, it's like promoting more of like sitting inside and playing video games. Which
But-
don't get me
Yes.
wrong, that's good for me.
But remember, they
the age
also
of the
air the
geek.
Poker World Championships.
Yeah.
Does that promote any healthier lifestyle than
I'm
playing
not
video
saying
games?
I'm not
If
saying
it-
they're
if
right.
it
I'm just saying
promotes
it's more of an
gambling
image
addiction.
thing.
Actually,
And even
like-
then, you can't really compare the popularity of like poker on TV to the popularity of basketball and soccer and football.
ESPN, they have ESPN 1, 2, and 3. Which ESPN aired the League of Legends Championship? 3.
3 is the online one.
Yeah.
Online
Yeah.
stream one.
2,
Heroes of the Storm was actually aired on 2, which is the
Okay.
live TV, like
because
cable one.
I know ESPN 1 is obviously where all your like your big sporting events are. ESPN 2 has the sporting events that don't sell out completely, but it also has, I'm pretty sure it's the DCI marching band finals. It's on ESPN 2. And the juggling world champions is on ESPN 2 or 3. I'm trying to remember.
What about that cup stacking competition?
I think that's on ESPN 3. I'm not gonna lie.
Is that on TV?
But yeah, so
That's
like
probably a sport.
they
you
still
have these
broadcast that.
other things
It's
that
a
people
competition.
like. Marching band. I was in marching
I
band
think
for
it's an
3
Olympic
years.
sport,
Like
too.
it's a big deal. Like
that-
people take it very seriously.
That requires a lot of physical
Exactly.
exertion.
It costs a lot of physical exertion. But when you ask a football fan what they think of marching band, they're like, it's a cool halftime thing. Like, they're very judgmental of pretty much every sport like that. It's just esports is now getting popular enough to like gain attention, and so people are like, what's this new thing? I don't like new things.
So it's really just those people who like football or baseball and don't want video games to be coupled in with the thing they like.
I think that's primarily
Yeah.
the reason.
That
Because
whole
it's like a
thing.
whole new area of games like that they just normally would not be exposed to or see, and it's suddenly on their channels or being like set as an equivalent to what they have deemed as sports, and that's a difficult thing. Like they may not even have heard of these games before.
Yeah.
I think I have the solution now. On ESPN, air the Madden NFL video game tournaments. It'll appeal to every sports fan, esports, regular sports, any.
Now
fan.
that's
No,
amazing.
you're gonna get those
Whatsoever.
people that are like,
They're like,
why don't you just play
$100
football? Why don't you do another game of league?
Yeah.
Then you're gonna start seeing those people.
And I
Okay,
mean, like-
fine. Everyone's just gonna hate each other then.
Well, there's
yeah.
obviously more
Welcome to
reasons and more
America.
complicated issues that tie into this other than just like, well, people who play sports don't like video games. Like it's obviously a lot more
Plenty.
complicated. than
Okay,
that.
It's
Like
a lot more
the vast
complicated.
majority
It
of
has to
people
be a lot more complicated.
like video games.
exactly. It went from like when video games were first invented to just being nerds to nowadays like pretty much everyone plays video games.
Yeah.
Like
To some
everyone's heard of
extent.
Mario. Everyone's heard of like I don't know like Call of Duty. Like everyone's heard of these big name games, no matter how like quote unquote good they are to you. Like they're popular.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Like they sell.
Yeah, ironically, football players are probably one of the America's biggest section of gamers.
Well, actually, one of the pro basketball players, he was like a huge fan of Dota, and he was at the Dota International Tournament. I remember I tuned in for a little bit, and
They just had him on camera.
yeah, they just had him on camera, and he was like getting his things signed by the players for the Dota
That's
thing.
awesome.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Like when people from other like worlds basically like they come and they interact like that.
Yeah.
When it's like taboo for them to.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
No one wants to admit that geeking out over sports is the same as geeking out over
Exactly.
video games.
Exactly.
You get
They're
somebody
exactly
with
the
like
same.
a
Exactly.
you get someone with a sports
Oh.
medicine degree who knows all the stats, or someone like there's another degree that I'm thinking of for stats. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but like these people, they just memorize everyone's stat. They memorize everyone's batting average, everyone's like pass records, and it's like
Fantasy football.
yeah,
Anybody?
It's like everybody who's like obsessing over fantasy football, it's the same thing. And like, I don't know, you look at them and it's like, well, what's the difference with that? And I don't know, like your build for league, like
Yeah.
Right.
it's the same thing. Like you're memorizing different stats for different reasons, but when you get right down to it, it's very similar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Well-
the secret.
I mean,
It's the secret. It's all a conspiracy.
Well, I think that kind of covers the whole esports debate, but as a kind of wrap-up question, would esports, like an actual esports competition, be something you would pay to see or like actually tune into a paid subscription to
I
see?
have, so
I would not.
yes.
I actually would not.
On TV or on
Okay, so-
I probably
Like,
wouldn't.
anything.
I
By like a cable network. You'd
Well,
have to pay to see this.
I'm
As
not-
much
I'm
as
not
the
a
cable
huge fan of
networks don't want to
esports. I
admit
think
it,
they
they
should
know
be able
their
to do
medium
more.
is dying.
Most
Internet has taken
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
TV by
Oh,
storm.
Most
Big thing is that okay, live streaming is definitely higher than
Right.
how cable is, and I think the audience for esports is definitely on Twitch, not on ESPN.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
It's cool that they're like putting it over there and all that, and people are. It kind of like gives it that mainstream exposure, but actually, I think that Twitch is growing much faster than that is.
Yeah. The
It's
streaming
kind of
services.
like TV versus radio was.
I don't know if it's that drastic.
I don't know if it's not that drastic because we're not going like from not
Yeah.
having visuals to.
It's definitely very drastic because we're moving away from like in-program advertisements,
Yeah.
which is very good. I think that's very healthy because
Yeah.
that's a whole different topic. But
Yeah.
don't wanna open that.
On our spin-off series, TV Talk.
Uh,
Look out for it next January. I
Nailed
don't
it.
know.
Hell,
Oh,
next
great.
January. Mark your calendars.
Oh, great. That means we're going to have to do TV talk.
Just puts his head down. Like, oh, why did you say that?
Today's topic, Game of Thrones versus Walking Dead.
Oh.
No.
Spoilers for both.
So, okay, you might not want to pay to just watch this on a network. Would you pay to go to like an actual stadium to watch this, like you would a football game or a baseball
Yes.
game?
Yeah.
I mean, it
Oh,
would
no.
depend on the cost, but yeah, I would be in for the experience definitely.
There are definitely people out there who will. I mean, I
course.
forgot who it was. I think it was Dota that sold out the Staples Center.
Well,
Is one of
if
them.
you look at
Yeah.
Korea and China, like
It's
starting
been
with
huge.
StarCraft 2 and like going
Well,
to
starting
Dota
with
and
Brood
League.
War.
Oh yeah, starting with Brood War officially, but
Yeah.
especially StarCraft 2, like you get giant stadiums just surrounding these people just like on their little consoles. They're just playing.
People
it's
take it very
crazy.
seriously.
Yeah.
And it's intense.
Yeah. I mean, it's they actually have a gaming channels over there that broadcast esports
'Cause
on
it's
their
a-
cable TV.
It's
like,
a big part of their culture over there. It's a big
it's
deal.
been a thing.
Go
So-
Asia.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
I think that's really kind of all we have time for at this point, and I don't think there's a lot much else we can talk about on this episode. So we will see you next time on Smack Talk.